The U.S. and Russia held talks today on how to end the war on Ukraine, but without anyone from Ukraine present. As one of its demands, Russia does not want to see Ukraine become a NATO member. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, meanwhile, says he will not accept any deal without Ukraine's consent. U.S. President Donald Trump just moments ago was asked about Ukraine not having a seat at that table. Take a listen to what he said.
I'm very disappointed. I hear that, they're upset about not having a seat. Well, they've had a seat for 3 years. And a long time before that. This could have been settled very easily. Just a half-baked negotiator could have settled this years ago without the loss of much land, very little land, without the loss of any lives. So when they're worried about not being seated, you mean somebody that should have gone in and made a deal a long time ago. You could have made a deal.
Meanwhile, Canada joined European talks on the war with Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly, saying this country wants to play a role in Ukraine's security once the war is over.
I've met with many European colleagues, and we've said we want to be part of these conversations regarding security guarantees. We want to be part of conversations linked to more Canadians being involved in protecting Ukraine, and we want to be part of conversations about the future of the Euro-Atlantic relationship. And we can't let Russia go unchecked. And that's also why I said when it comes to the proposal of having Russia part of the G7, I said, no way.
Yulia Kovalev is Ukraine's ambassador to Canada, and she's with me live in studio. Hi, Ambassador. Good to see you. Thank you very much for making the time.
Thank you for inviting.
I want to start off on the question posed to Donald Trump, which is around the lack of presence of Ukraine at these so-called peace talks that are taking place between Russia and the United States. What does it say to you that Ukraine is not there?
I think you rightly quoted what President Zelensky said, that Ukraine won't accept any of the deal that is done behind the back of Ukraine and does not include Ukraine on the table, but also our European partners on the table. Because first, Russia started this war. And it is up to Russia to end this war. They can just withdraw the troops from Ukrainian territory and will end the war. Of course, Ukraine wants peace, and I think more than ever, and more than nobody else, Ukrainians want the peace. But we want a just and lasting peace. And we saw the ceasefires. We saw them back in 2014 when Russia invaded and occupied Crimea and eastern regions of Ukraine. And we were warning all of our partners that Russia won't stop there. Today, as we are talking about any of the potential peace, the core what Ukraine is saying to all of our partners, and the core what Ukraine needs, is this peace to be just and lasting. And what does it mean actually? What is the most kind of a straightforward way in order to achieve this peace? It's Ukraine's NATO membership. There could be some other options, but let's be very clear. It will require more resources. It will require some troops on the ground. It will require continued support of Ukrainian armed forces, of Ukrainian defense industry. So Ukraine's membership in NATO is the easier, if I could say, cheaper and more effective way to ensure a long and lasting peace.
And I want to ask you about that because the U.S. has kind of framed that as a non-starter already. But I also, you mentioned something that we've heard, not only Ukraine, but your allies say very frequently over the last 3 years, which is that Russia could end this war tomorrow if it wanted to. U.S. President Trump seems to take a view today that it is actually the onus on Ukraine. That clip that we just played, essentially insinuating that President Zelensky could have negotiated an end to this war prior to now, saying things like he had 3 years to do so. I'm just saying what he's saying, certainly not trying to justify it. How do you respond to that?
I think we need to, in this situation, look on the core where we are now. Today, in parallel, as we are talking now, Odessa, one of the biggest Ukrainian cities, is on fire because of Russian drones, Russian missiles. Almost every day we see the missile attacks on Ukrainian critical infrastructure, on Ukrainian energy system, on Ukrainian cities. Just like for the last week, Russia launched 40 different types of the missiles, over 800 drones, and used over 1,000 of the guided aerial bombs. Is this the country that wants seriously engage in peace?
But do they not, maybe they don't feel like they have to anymore because of the posture taken by the U.S. Like, how worrying is that to you?
Look, I think, we all, and that was probably the big outcome of the Munich conference that was widely discussed around the world, that we've done our job. We are increasing our own defense production. We have now today one of the strongest army, because what today Ukraine is fighting, it's not only Russian troops. There are North Korean troops, there are Iranian drones. So today Ukrainian army is withholding actually the armies of 2 nuclear powers. This is the reality. On the other side, there is a wake-up call, and I think very serious, what we see from the recent 3 days of engagement between the European and broader allies in understanding that there is more to be done. We have been talking here and with our partners like for the last 3 years that there need to be increased defense spendings, that there need to be increased investment into the defense production, into the security. Not all the countries are still there, like with the NATO 2% target. Many countries made their already commitment, but there are not everybody. But we see more and more these intensified discussions. There was the leadership meeting of some European countries led by President Macron yesterday. Tomorrow there will be another one. So we had already heard the comments from UK Prime Minister, British Prime Minister about UK open to sending the troops to Ukraine in the post-war to guarantee security from some Nordic countries. We also heard it from our European allies. So I think, this discussion is shifting.
Right. But I guess I want to ask you about that, because I think bottom line for people who are watching right now, the U.S. has had a leadership role in support up until now in supporting Ukraine, and certainly the last administration was not saying, that President Zelensky or Ukraine started this in any capacity. If you remove that from the equation, do you think Europe, for example, Europe and Canada can actually supplant the role both from a financial perspective and an aid perspective, but also a moral perspective that the U.S. had? Like, is there, or are we in for a very different outcome?
I think we need to be realistic in what world we would like to be, and are we ready to protect it? Whether it is feasible, definitely yes. Because if we look on, the structure of the whole support that, and especially when we look on the military support to Ukraine, like around 40% that is Ukraine-owned defense production, which we significantly increased. And then the rest, like 60%, is both Europe, Canada, and US stepped in. But we need not to forget that there are 300 billion of frozen Russian assets, which are held in Europe. And that also is one of the ways to seize these assets and to use them to continue to support Ukraine. Now, and as the future investment into the security guarantees, it's a time for bold decisions. We don't have much time for the, different kind of the talks or, frankly, concerns. This is the time, and I think, especially in Europe, there is this feeling, especially around the discussions in the Munich conference, that this is the time where the actions need to be done.
Okay, I have to leave it on that note. Ambassador, I appreciate you making the time for the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yulia Kovalev is Ukraine's ambassador to Canada.